another day, another shark alarm. In the busy summer months, the alarm can go off more than 15 times a week.
We just spotted a sighting come from Billy's Cottage moving to a safest corner, so we had to clear the beach.
It wasn't always like this. Not too long ago, there were only 1 or 2 shark alerts for the whole of the summer season. But things began to change. In April 2004, J.P. Andrew was attacked by a great white shark while surfing in Muizenberg, a popular beach in Cape Town, South Africa. The attack was so vicious, his survival was nothing short of a miracle. JP survived the attack, but it highlighted a growing problem for the people of False Bay in Cape Town. The False Bay area was experiencing one of the most dramatic increases in shark attacks and shark-related activity in its history.
It's only in the last few years we've suddenly had 7 really serious great white attacks, starting with me.
Recent attacks had left the community in fear of the water and desperate for a solution to this new shark problem. In 1974, a monster from the deep swam into our lives and forever changed the way we feel when we use the ocean. The film Jaws terrified and entertained millions of cinema-goers around the globe. It sealed the great white's reputation as a man-eater, an animal with no natural equal, and more worryingly, much higher than us on the food chain whenever we enter the ocean.
Sharks are really the last primal fear that we have. It's a last real point where you may be the hunted as opposed to the hunter, and it is a very primal response.
It is this fearsome reputation that has spawned a multi-million-dollar shark industry.
Any type of testosterone-laden sport, there's a picture of these big white teeth.
South Africa is, or particularly the Western Cape, is growing in reputation as the place to go and see a great white shark. And I know a lot of overseas people fly all the way here simply just to go cage diving.
Filmmakers, photographers, and thrill seekers know if they want to get up close to the great white, this is one of the top places in the world to visit. Situated on the southernmost tip of Africa, False Bay and its warm Indian Ocean waters provide the perfect conditions to view the great white in its natural habitat. It is also home to Seal Island, home of the famous Air Jaws, and is a prime shark viewing hotspot.
We used to hunt great whites here for trophies. So based on the perception that we might wipe them out, it was decided to protect them. And I'm very glad that they did that.
But this sentiment is not shared by everybody, especially those who depend on the sea for their livelihood.
I'm personally of the belief that maybe if they took out one or two of these sharks wouldn't be such a bad idea, particularly at Muizenberg Corner. That's probably controversial at the moment because everybody's become shark huggers.
I run a surf school and I have about 1,000 tourists through here every summer. I mean, I know that they've always been around. When we were kids, they were around. But they've only been a protected species in the last 10 years. You know, they were culled every so often. Fishermen were allowed to catch them. And it kind of had control of the whole feeding cycle. At the moment, there's nothing in the feeding chain that eats a great white. We're just going to get sharks breeding and breeding and breeding. No one's allowed to catch them. They're protected species. We're going to end up with False Bay, a fish tank full of great whites.
For a bay that relies on tourism as one of its main income streams, a shark-infested shoreline was definitely bad for business.
You know, you've heard of the odd shark being sighted, but not as regularly or as frequently as they are now.
Immediately after JP's attack, sales at the restaurants around here went down tremendously, where in the morning when they'd open up, they hardly had people for coffee. So obviously, lots of people were scared.
People don't go as deep as they do in the water, sort of knee deep, waist deep at the most. So people are more aware. I belong to a kayak club here, and the boat sales at the local kayak shop definitely took a dip. As long as there aren't any more attacks in the next couple of months, I think it'll pick up again. One of the most recent attacks here, a 23-year-old man was taken spearfishing. The last thing that his dive buddy saw of him was him being swum out to sea with both his arms stuck in the shark's mouth. And the previous fatality was also eaten completely, and that is unusual. So there's unusual behaviour around here.
Besides the negative effect on businesses, the increase in shark activity had sparked alarm among the local people who use the sea on a regular basis.
The sharks now seem to be leaving the island at a certain time of the year and cruising into the shallows.
You know, in the 15 years that I've been involved with National Sea Rescue, there's been the odd report of shark sightings. But in the more recent, the last 3 years, we've seen quite an increase with Muizenberg, St. James and Fish Hoek beaches regularly being closed to swimming due to shark sightings.
In the 10 years of that 15 years, they closed the beach once because of a white shark, and recently they're closing the beach, 15, 16, 17 times a month during summer. So I think there's definitely enough evidence to suggest that there's an increase in activity in the inshore zone.
There was also a suspicion that some sharks were becoming regular features at some beaches.
The spotter seems to think the biggest one we see is a regular, and it seems they do have a defined territory that they patrol.
He comes right into the corner, swims up the catwalk and disappears.
I have friends in Fish Hoek who are deep sea fishermen who've had their outboard motors mauled by large sharks.
We've seen sharks right in the marina at Simonstown, right next to the yachts. You walk down there and you see the sharks go by. So they're coming in everywhere, not just Fish Hoek.
Sea kayaking is a popular sport in False Bay, home to several clubs. They were amongst the first to notice the rise in shark activity, with several kayaks attacked by great whites.
The kayaking, I think those guys, they're very brave.
There has been some attacks.
Yeah.
So as I turned towards him, I saw the shark come out the water. It was just like in the Jaws movie. His lips peeled back and it grabbed the front of his ski.
I just remember seeing the jaw with the front of my boat in its mouth.
I don't know how Trevor stayed in the boat because it started shaking it.
And I remember thinking, where's the fin? Why isn't the fin sticking up? So I don't know if the fin was behind me, but I just remember thinking that it was
big and solid.
They said it's about 4.5 meters, 4.5 to 5 meters. So all I saw was the head come out, grab the front of it.
It was just an inquisitive bite to see what was happening. So I think I was quite lucky from that aspect.
Craig Bovim was less fortunate. He was about to have a close encounter that would change his life forever.
Against my better judgment, I went diving because there was big surf that day. And I saw this thing over my head, which I initially took for a whale. But when I got closer, I saw the teeth sticking out. And I knew I was in trouble. So I stuck my head out the surface and looked around, and I just saw this big fin coming towards me. And when I saw him coming, I just knew that he was in attack mode and he was going to bite me. So he mistimed his bite and he ended up with my arms down inside his mouth rather than my head. It was only when he started shaking me a bit that I reacted. I reacted by kicking him with my knee. I eventually pulled my right arm until something gave, and it came out, and all I saw was the stump of my arm here. There was a little piece of bone here, and I managed to get that under my buckle and dropped the belt, and I just popped up like a cork. I saw my hand hanging down, and I knew at least I had a hand, and it inspired me to get out, you know. And I got to the shore, eventually sort of washed up on the rocks.
Luckily for Craig, a local doctor who lived nearby was on hand to administer life-saving treatment.
I'm happy I'm alive, you know. Half the people that have been bitten in this last 7 years are dead.
Doctors worked through the night and into Christmas Day to save his life and reconstruct his damaged arms.
This photograph was taken quite early on in the surgery, the emergency surgery that they performed on me. All my flexor tendons were severed, as well as my ulnar nerve and ulnar artery. And the doctors have highlighted the median nerve here, which they were absolutely astounded that it had survived, because it was virtually the only thing remaining on the front of my arm.
It was during his recovery that Craig first became aware of the local anger towards cage diving.
Tourism operators are going to sea and are baiting the white sharks to come close to the cages and come close to the boats in order to view them, obviously, which happens here, very close to here.
After researching the cage diving industry and its potential impact on the great white, Craig has become an outspoken critic of the industry as a whole.
I've sort of become mired in the whole controversy now because I firmly believe that feeding and baiting and teasing and touching of any wild animals is detrimental to the animals as well as to the environment and to us humans.
Despite the debate over the consequences of cage diving, the great white is still a massive factor in attracting tourists to the Cape.
Because the tourists come here not fully aware of how locals in Cape Town feel about cage diving, and you as people who are coming here from Europe can go of your own accord and just ask anybody you meet, from person in the street to the person in the bank, and say to them, what do you think about baiting and teasing of great white sharks? And they'll go, not a good idea.
And they went in the water.
Yeah, it's my first time back in the sea.
With its fearsome reputation, the great white is a massive attraction for tourists. Shark attack stories attract a lot of media coverage. Salacious stories highlighting every gruesome detail of the attack. In fact, such is the curiosity in sharks, particularly the great white, that figures indicate a definite rise in shark tourism immediately after an attack. And Gunsby, less than 2 hours from Cape Town, is a town dedicated purely to satisfying that curiosity. It has a never-ending supply of tourists willing to pay top dollar to climb overboard into a wire cage in a sea full of great white sharks.
That's it. There we go. There we go. Some tuna flakes. Some tuna flakes as well as some shark liver that they put in the water to attract the shark to us. So it can take anything from about 20 minutes on average to 40 minutes before we establish our first animal. And from there on, you can get up to eight different animals every day, right?
Shark is on your left, you look to your right. Down. I'm gonna get the next group also ready. The next group is going to go inside the cabin.
I'm not sure if I have a problem with cage diving per se, or whether I have a problem with the methods that are used. From a gut instinct, the idea that sharks might become habituated to proximity with humans does sound like it's problematic.
The view is also shared by many locals who believe there is a direct link between cage diving and the increase in shark attacks.
All right, there very definitely arises in both sightings and in attacks. There's a whole lot of theories.
This shark diving, that sharks actually relating to boats to food.
Because when it wasn't happening, there weren't shark attacks, and now that it is happening, there's been like 8 in the last 3 years or so.
On top of all of that, sharks are protected, so they can't be caught or they can't be dealt with, but you can go look at them.
Chumming has been put forward as a possible cause. They say that they've been chumming for 20 years and they've never had problems before. Well, yes, in this valley we have baboons breaking into houses to get at food. 20 years ago we didn't have that. So, the baboons have learnt over the last 20 years. I'm sure the sharks are able to learn as well.
We actually once had a boat less than 2 k's off the shore here with cages on. We could see it from the beach. We could see cages on the boat.
We had 3 attacks, all from a very big shark. And there's been no effort, as far as I'm concerned, made to collate data from those attacks. The forensic data is shown on my arm here in terms of the bite spacing. This is a dental record of a specific shark. And if it could be proven that this was an individual that was causing the problem, I wouldn't say go and kill that shark now. I would say, well, we might have a nuisance shark on our hands here. And we also have to ask ourselves is, how is that nuisance shark created? Possibly this potential nuisance shark was one of the regulars at Seal Island who goes there every day and gets a bit of chum and a bit of bait and a bit of nose rubbing and a bit of teasing from the operators here.
The local government, aware of the shark problem, created various agencies to look at the increase of shark attacks.
Inviting a whole range of specialists to
Greg Olofsson is head of the Shark Working Group set up by the Cape Town City Council to investigate the rise in shark attacks and implement measures to prevent or at least reduce the possibility of further attacks.
When there is a shark attack, everyone wants to know why. And when we've had attacks, that's the first sort of question we get from everybody is, what's changed that there's a shark attack? I think people must recognize that there have always been white sharks in our waters. We set up the Shark Working Group along with Marine and Coastal Management. And the purpose there is to really look at a long-term strategy and approach to how do we manage the shark issue in Cape Town. I think there's definitely been an increase of shark activity in the inshore zone, and I don't think that's unfortunately we can't measure that scientifically. The monitoring wasn't taking place over the last 5 years, but I think the sort of more anecdotal evidence of people that I know and people speaking to me, surfers, surf skiers, people that use the water, there's a massive increase in the reports of people having interactions with white sharks. Worldwide in any ecological system, wherever people have interfered and got too close to predators, the conflict has increased. So whether you look at bears, lions, whatever the case may be, where you're putting people and those predators close together, you're changing the relationship between the two. So that would be the one concern that I have about cage diving, is that you're shifting the natural balance that may exist. I think, whether there's a link to cage diving, and that is a difficult one to answer. The way that I would look at it is to say, cage diving's been going on probably for the last 10 to 15 years. It's probably been more regulated in the last 5 to 8 years, but it has been a practice that's been going on for a long time. If there was a direct link between cage diving and shark attacks, I would expect to have seen more shark attacks happening, considering that we have we have high numbers of white sharks in the inshore zone. From the monitoring that we're doing in last year, in 12 months, we had 135 sightings of white sharks at Muizenberg. Those are records for that. And in all of those cases, there were surfers in the water at the same time. And I think really it speaks more to the fact that the white sharks showed little or no interest in people. They knew that the surfers were in the water. They generally stayed 200 to 300 meters away from the surfers. And most times that we had shark sightings, we didn't have to close the beach. The sharks didn't move towards the surfers. My view would be that if they really saw us as prey, there would have been a lot of attacks in the last little while, as opposed to. So you can almost ask the question the other way around. Instead of saying why has there been so many attacks, you could almost ask why has there been so few attacks? Because we've got a lot of white sharks and we have a lot of people in the water.
Craig, however, remains deeply sceptical of the local authorities' position on cage diving.
And the question is put to the scientists, is chumming and baiting affecting the situation? And they generally say no. We can't really rely on the scientists to make a call on this subject. And unfortunately, they are the people that are advising the government here. We supposedly have a shark working group in this city that's come as a result of having many shark attacks.
Craig's main concern is that government policy is being driven by financial rather than ecological reasons.
The South African government seems to be aware that there are ethical and environmental concerns and issues around cage diving, which they're turning a blind eye to, primarily because there's an income stream here in areas where it's needed.
As one major possibility of economic growth and job creation. So they want to develop tourism, and they're looking at new resources, and especially in the marine whales and sharks and so on.
The South African government's justification for allowing cage diving and the loosely policed methods that they supposedly have here is primarily because they need the income. Marine and coastal management have said very clearly, we're a developing nation, we need the money. So we will forego some of our high standards because of this. So they're aware that this isn't a very ethical thing to do.
I recognise cage diving as a massive economic industry for the Western Cape, and our natural environment is one of our key bases for our economic development here. And I also see cage diving as an incredible way of educating and making people aware about great white sharks. I don't think anyone's been cage diving and seen a great white and hasn't come away thinking that that was one of the best experiences of their life.
So if you went to Gansbaai before cage diving started, and while watching, that place was very quiet and very dead. And it basically was just in summertime over the school holidays that you'll get some people just coming for sun and sea. Now you're getting always people coming through, and there's more restaurants, there's more shops opening up. And if you go and speak to the Gansbaaiers himself, they said it was quite a boost. The local shops, people buying cool drinks and so on. So there's more people getting jobs, and there's more money and foreign money coming into Gansbaai.
South Africa has a very proud record of looking after its fish stocks and recording it. However, sharks, particularly the smaller, lower value sharks, are one of the least protected fish in these waters.
You know, if you're sitting in the UK and other places, you've got a decision of going to Australia, to South Africa, or somewhere else. And quite a few people were asked, they said why they selected South Africa is because the sharks, there was a clinching factor. That's why they choose South Africa.
Obviously, every tourist that comes out here stays in a hotel, uses a hire car, you know, all of those kind of spin-off jobs happen from that. And I'm not saying we should make decisions based purely on the economic base and say, well, this is going to create a lot of money, so it must be fine. But I do think MCM has applied their mind to the cage diving industry. I think they have tightened up the restrictions around it.
Considering we know so little about this animal, it seems rather blasé that humans here, for the purpose of making money, think that it's fine to go and feed and carry on with them. I think it's the only wild animal in South Africa that you are allowed to feed. Doesn't sound like shark conservation to me. It sounds like pure money-making greed.
But while the debate continued, a shark attack that would affect the False Bay community in a profound way happened off Fish Hoek Beach.
It's just unheard of. I've lived in Fish Hoek all my life. This is the first shark attack that I'm aware of happening at Fish Hoek.
I had personally warned her on 2 occasions because she is a personal friend. I knew her fairly well. And she was quite happy with where she was swimming, and had a philosophy that if the time came and the shark took her, well, that was what was to be.
I came out of my bedroom at the end of the deck and looked out. If you see the orange buoy just down here in the water, about 15-20 meters further out, I saw the thrashing in the water. This shark had this woman in her mouth. I ran inside to get my cell phone to phone Darren Zimmerman.
They could still see Tina in the water at that time when he phoned. So immediately I notified Cape Medical Response.
And was thrashing her around in the water. There's a massive amount of blood in the water. He let her go again. Swam around in a circle, and at that stage there was a second person in the water. We were screaming and shouting, telling him to get out the water. He finally got out the water. The shark had gone towards him, turned around,
came back and took her out of the water, and the only thing they found was her bathing cap.
It was fairly quick. It was within 8 minutes of the attack. I was on scene and David was on scene with me.
I think people thought it just wasn't going to happen.
30 seconds. As soon as you call the blood, the recall blood, and you keep it, and it will do. and I can understand. Next one,
There was absolutely nothing to be seen. All we could see was her cap still floating in the water.
I'm not sure which is more sort of difficult to deal with, the search and wondering what you're going to find, or finding the body and having to deal with that and the family.
The shark that the helicopter had hovered over off the eastern side of the Fish Hoek Bay, the crew indicated to be somewhere near the length of the helicopter itself.
Well, I don't go swimming at Fish Hoek Beach anymore. I was born in Fish Hoek. I've spent many hours on Fish Hoek Beach. I don't mind walking along the sand now, but I won't go swimming.
The attack on Tyner Webb was so shocking, the community decided to take matters into their own hands.
As a result of the shark attacks, surfers out of their own initiative started a shark spotting.
It was a program that was initiated about 1.5 years, 2 years ago. A couple of the guys got together and thought this was really a necessity.
The chap up on the mountain has a remote control to set off the shark alarm.
The flag is raised, the surfers get out until the shark moves on.
The white flag is sharks being spotted.
The red flag is for caution, just to warn people that there has been a shark in the area. The green flag that's flying outside is to show that the visibility in the water is absolutely clear.
And then the black flag means is bad visibility.
While the causes of the shark problem are debated, the policing of the cage diving industry and the conduct of certain operators have drawn heated criticism from the community. Despite being bound to a code of conduct, operators blatantly flout the laws.
As far as I understand, and I'm aware of the rules and regulations governing cage diving, that there should be no rewarding of sharks, no touching of sharks, and as far as I understand as well, that you're not supposed to be outside of the cage. And I do know that there's quite a lot of people that do take people and sort of almost free dive with white sharks.
The fact is there's not enough policing of the operators, and inevitably the sharks do get the bait.
It's obviously, I think Marine and Coastal Management's approach to cage diving has the best intentions, and they've tried to put in place regulations that work and that take safety considerations into account. But it's a massive industry, it generates an enormous amount of money, and it's obviously very difficult to regulate. So there's a lot of competition amongst the operators to generate that income. That kind of competition will always mean that the operators will be trying to better each other and to provide the biggest thrill and the closest encounter and the best sighting and the most exciting sighting. So I think its inherent kind of problem with this industry is that it does create that kind of opportunistic approach to providing the biggest thrill for tourists. And tourists in their own right will need to bear some of that responsibility. Everyone will go on the shark boat. They won't come back inshore and say, well, I had a fantastic day, but I'm going to report my operator because he made the shark gape. They'll come back and say, well, it's absolutely awesome. The guy made the shark gape right next to the boat and I got to touch it.
And it's only when they're out at sea and they've seen the shark swimming around, they say to the operator, but we need pictures of the teeth, for whatever reason, they need those big, biting, scary images. And the operator says, well, I can't do that. We've got a code of conduct. And the guy says, I'm out here on a boat. I want those images. So I've learned that it happens. Obviously, more money probably changes hands or whatever, but it happens. And it's not okay. And somebody's got to stop it. If it's not being policed by the Marine and Coastal Management and the relative authorities, then the easiest next step is to ban it outright. And let us transform this industry into something that everybody's happy with.
Regardless of the outcome of the debate, this problem remains very real for the people of False Bay. A decline in tourists and beach users was having a very negative effect on the local economy. For the survivors like JP and Craig, saddled with crippling medical bills and life-changing injuries, the great white in the shoreline remained a very real and present threat, with no clear cause or solution in sight. We returned 8 years later and met up with marine biologist Alison Koch to find out what her research into the causes of the shark attacks had revealed.
In 2006 we knew very little about what the white shark population was doing here. And I had actually just started my master's research, and I was initially focused around the seal colony, and I was looking at hunting behavior. And it was only after the spate of attacks that I decided to focus the research on understanding what the sharks were doing closer inshore. And at that stage we really had almost no information. We didn't know if it was one shark coming inshore, if there was a number of sharks coming inshore, whether they were using it for one day. There was nothing. So I was involved in a project that specifically looked at whether cage diving was influencing white shark behavior at Seal Island in False Bay. And when we started the project, we went in thinking that the cage diving operations were changing shark behavior. So our hypotheses were that the cage diving activities, the chumming and the baiting, were creating a change in behavior with the white sharks. And we expected to see a number of things to support that. We actually found the opposite. And so what we'd done throughout the study was we tagged sharks with acoustic transmitters, so we knew when the sharks were there, even when we weren't. And we also collected data from all of the cage diving boats, including our own research vessel, to look at how long those sharks actually stayed around the cage diving boats for compared to how long they were in the area. And the interesting thing was that we found the average contact time of the sharks was less than 5 minutes. The tagged sharks that we were monitoring, there were 20 of them, they actually stopped responding over the season to cage diving boats. And so we were seeing complete opposite behavior to what we'd expected if cage diving was actually influencing the sharks' behavior.
The shark diving operators, especially the ones based in False Bay, where most of the serious attacks had occurred, had had in the past a lot of criticism aimed at them, including the belief that they were directly responsible for the rise in attacks. Rob Lawrence is a shark cage diving operator based in False Bay. We met up with him for his take on the great white shark, the code of conduct, and the regulations governing cage diving.
I'm an owner of African Shark Eco Charters. It's a shark cage diving and viewing business based in Simonstown in Cape Town, which is in South Africa. Basically, we sell an outing, sort of a safari on the sea. So we'll take you guys from Simonstown into False Bay, show you the seabirds, penguins, seals that are on the seal island, as well as show you, depending what time of the year, white sharks actively hunting Cape fur seals, as well as putting you in the cage with a chance of seeing great white sharks up close in a relatively short space of time. But we are a very regulated industry for starters. If we had altered their behavior in any way, there's a few factors. You would get multiple shark attacks pretty much a daily or weekly basis, because white sharks don't only have to feed once every 2 or 3 years or once a year, as our shark attack records will bear fruit to.
We know that the white sharks are here year-round, but depending on the season, they use the bay very, very differently.
Our business shuts down for 4 months of the year, 5 months of the year, depending on the shark patterns. And if I could alter and change sharks' behavior and keep them around our boat at will, as a lot of people assume, we wouldn't have days where we go to sea with clients where we don't see sharks, which makes them unhappy. And we wouldn't have months of the year where the sharks have a natural movement pattern away from the seal colonies where we are restricted in working inshore. And we have to pretty much shut our business down, which you do interacting with white sharks for at least 3 months of the year.
And we also didn't see any change in natural predatory behavior on the island. So the main reason that the great white sharks are coming to Seal Island is because they are there to feed on the seals. And whether cage diving is happening there or not, those white sharks will still be attracted to that area.
As part of our permit regulations, we've got a big list of what we may and may not do at the island. But as far as the baiting procedures and chumming goes, we are limited to the volume of bait we're allowed to take out per day, as well as what we're allowed to use. We're only allowed to use fish products. There's no mammal blood, so you can't go down to the abattoir and get a big jug of blood and drilled in the water. We can only use fish-based products, of which we are limited to 25 kilograms per day.
I think that, the cage diving industry started in 1991. And it was allowed to operate without any kind of regulation for many, many years. And there was a lot of interacting with the sharks, free diving, touching, and I think that one of the recommendations that myself and my colleagues made in 2006 was that the codes of conduct needed to be enforced more, and also that open channels of where tourists might have complaints or someone might seeing those rules being flouted, that open channels of communication be set up by government to be able to really follow up on any transgressions. And I think that through social media, that has actually been allowed. So when somebody does flout the rules and when people are not doing what they're supposed to be doing, that very quickly goes on the YouTube channel.
And of that, also the big thing is our code of conduct permit-wise, we are a shark, it's a baited dive, not a feed. So we actually actively told we're not actively allowed to feed sharks. So I don't go to sea with 25 kilograms and I come back with nothing every single day. Sharks do get the baits, but it comes down to your skill of maneuvering and operating with the sharks as to how much bait you do use. But we are limited to that. But the big distinction is it's a baited dive and not a shark feed. There's a big difference between the two.
And I think that once people get the opportunity to actually experience seeing the white shark in its natural habitat, being interacted with responsibly, it's a fantastic way to get people on board with, conservation. So it can be a really great tool, but only if it's managed responsibly and the sharks are treated with respect and the environment is treated with respect.
Our biggest factor that we contribute is changing the general public's perception about what the white sharks do and educating them about the uniqueness of the animal, the beauty of the animal, and how different the animal is in reality from what it is in the newspapers and on TV, unfortunately. Because even to this day, a lot of the television shows you see, the business end of selling the shark trip is the absolute danger of it. And slowly but surely the public perception is changing, and hopefully we can contribute towards that.
Craig remains sceptical about the industry and is still advocating reforms and a more ethical approach to shark viewing.
What I've been trying to put on the discussion table is how the cage diving industry should be trying to improve and transform itself. You're in a fantastic wild setting, and the chances of you seeing predation by a white shark on a seal are quite high, and that alone is a product that has huge tourism potential. One doesn't need to do the down and dirty thing of baiting them, teasing them, and getting up too close necessarily.
The method of tagging sharks, which is commonly used by all researchers, has also become a contentious issue. Sharks are caught with a baited hook and lifted onto the vessel, tagged and released. O-Search, a scientific organization that tags and tracks the sharks globally, came to Seal Island in 2012 to tag the great white. Many locals and environmentalists are against this practice as they feel it causes great stress and damage to the sharks that are hooked and tagged.
Yeah, the guys weren't keen on them hooking sharks here, and then unfortunately we did have a fatal shark attack while they were here.
At the exact time that the O-Search vessel was operating here, which led a lot of the local Cape Townians to ask for that process to be stopped.
They took a severe brunt of the local surfing and communities, and that goes back to our earlier stating. So there's a fine balance where the local environment communities accepted the shark cage diving, but I don't think they want any more people, and I don't think they want any more foreign aspects coming in that can potentially tilt the balance around.
What came out subsequently, speaking to people, the cage diving operators, was that they noticed that the sharks left.
Yeah. 2012, I think it was. They did come and they hooked and tagged a few sharks at Seal Island. In the preceding 6 weeks following their interaction, the sharks did vanish and leave the area. So I can only speak from our personal impact. That was in the good season. It was in May 2012. These guys came, hooked several sharks in the space of a few days. Following that event, the sharks did leave the area, and I've never had that experience ever in May in 20 years of working at Seal Island. So that definitely seemed to have a greater impact on the sharks' behaviour and movement patterns than towing a decoy did.
It's very feasible that hooking and lifting these sharks out the water was quite unpleasant for the sharks and caused them to move away. And they might have moved away into areas where people were at risk and possibly even led to the fatality.
He also raises a very pertinent issue regarding one of the possible causes of increased shark attacks, not only in South Africa, but globally.
If the white shark population has recovered anything like the whale population has recovered, then we're particularly looking at a time bomb, because the white shark has been protected in isolation. The other smaller species of local sharks have not been protected, and they are being overfished, and they're a big component of the white shark diet. So we're looking at a depletion of the biomass, marine biomass. At the same time, we're protecting the guy who needs to eat a lot at the top of that food chain. No, one doesn't have to do the math to realize that there's a time bomb happening, and it's not going to be easy to make those difficult decisions when we've got a lot of white sharks and they don't have a lot to eat. What the sharks are going to do is they're going to start moving further afield to look for food, and that means them cruising areas where we surf and where there are a lot more water users around. So
after a similar spate of attacks, the local authorities in Western Australia have decided to use shark nets and drum lines to cull sharks as a preventative measure.
Australia has suffered very similar issues in Southwest Australia. They decided to start culling a whole variety of sharks, which was quite a knee-jerk response, and from what I can glean, maybe a political response to keep people happy.
Particularly in 2006, there was a lot of pressure to cull the great whites. There was a lot of uncertainty about the size of the population and what it was doing. Also, people really hadn't experienced that negative side of white sharks, and the spate of attacks that occurred between 2003 and 2006 really put a tremendous amount of pressure on authorities with a lot of calls for culls, introduction of shark nets, introduction of drum lines. The city went through a process where they actually looked at the available options for them, and shark nets and drum lines were in those options together with a number of others.
This is a particularly cruel practice and results in a slow and painful death for the sharks. Not all sharks are culled. Some are lifted onto the boat, tagged and released, but are in such a distressed state and badly injured that some do not survive the ordeal.
What was interesting at the time was that a local businessman and local fishermen and local lifesavers had started a shark spotting program. It had been running for 2 years without any governmental support. It was driven by the local community, and after reviewing all of the options, the city decided to back the Shark Spotters program because they wanted to implement something that was environmentally low risk to wildlife and to the environment. Most of the funding comes from the City of Cape Town and the Save Our Seas Foundation, and then we're also supported by local businesses that fundraise for us and support us.
I am on the Shark Spotting Committee. I'm one of the members on the committee, and they're an incredible initiative.
My name is Monwa. I'm from Shark Spotters. This is the spot that we look out sharks from.
One of the key things with the shark spotting program is not only to provide direct safety for people, but it's also to provide jobs and build capacity in our local communities. And so our shark spotters, of which there are 43 now, they come from disadvantaged backgrounds. They come from local areas where poverty is very rife. And the spotting program actually provides a really good job for them, as well as building up their skills.
Lungs, now we think of air, we're getting in, and air we need to breathe out.
And it's grown. It started out in Muizenberg, and then it went to Fish Hoek and Cork Bay.
They're based in many of the beaches around Cape Town, both on the False Bay and the Atlantic coastlines.
The surfers are happy, the community's happy, and it's made a big difference. It gives the people a little bit of a fallback, so if they see sharks, the conditions are good for spotting. They can clear the guys out the water.
Yeah, I believe that they've prevented a number of potential attacks, and yeah, they're vital to our surf industry.
It's been a very good proactive step, and by all accounts, it's working well. It shows that there are different ways of dealing with shark issue problems, and killing them is not the only route.
Even though the shark spotters are now funded by the Cape Town City Council, many local businesses regularly host fundraising events, not only to raise money for them, but also to raise awareness of this unique service.
We've got Alison on board, Sarah, and they are doing such an incredible job. Mono is hands-on all day, and he's really leading the team. So yeah, we're super stoked to be part of the initiative and to be working alongside them.
While the causes for the change in shark behaviour are still debated, the local authorities are continuing to push forward with proactive measures to prevent shark attacks in False Bay. Fish Hoek Corner, where Tyner Webb was so brutally taken, has had an exclusion net installed.
And Fish Hoek has had 2 fatal shark attacks and 1 very serious shark attack where a man lost his leg. And that has had a negative impact on the community here.
People would come with their families from all over the world to come and spend their family holiday here. We call them the Bucket and Spade Brigade, and that had now gone. There was now no more Bucket and Spade Brigade. Nobody was going to come down to swim in the sea here with the likelihood of being eaten by a shark. The City of Cape Town approached ourselves, and initially Greg Olofsson and myself sat together and we thought about how we could do something, and we started talking about the net.
The exclusion net is another proactive way to keep people and sharks apart. And it was a trial project which started last year in 2013. And after a year of trialing the net, it's an incredible success. Not only have the public really embraced it, but it has a very low environmental impact. So unlike traditional shark nets, this exclusion net is a complete barrier and doesn't actually catch sharks. It also doesn't catch any other animals, and it provides increased confidence for those people that are afraid of sharks and those parents that really want a safe training place for their kids. So it really has ticked all the boxes.
Once Fish Hoek had an exclusion net, then people were much happier to come here because they knew there was an area to swim in. So they, even though it was quite a small area, they were able to go into that area freely and swim out of their depth in this area that was safe. And the reverberations around the country were great because people were now coming down to Fish Hoek again with their bucket and spade and being able to swim.
One of the things that is key is in terms of shark safety is not only education and awareness, but also being adaptable and using technology where possible. So the shark spotting program is very effective in places where you have adequate height. The exclusion net can be employed in areas which is relatively calm, but a lot of areas around our coast don't have those 2 things to allow those to be viable options. And so technology such as electric deterrents, which focus on deterring the shark from a beach, are increasingly being looked at.
It gives off a pulse, and they're going to do that at Glencairn Beach. They're going to lie it across the bay there for 6 months and just do like a trial and see whether it works or not.
And it's going to be very interesting to see whether it's going to be a viable option. And so we've just started the trial. It's been run by the KwaZulu-Natal Sharks Board, and we are part of the monitoring team. And we're going to wait and see how it actually works.
I think it's great. It makes me feel a lot more safe.
I think people have kind of come to the stage where they realize there are sharks in the water. We are water users, and as long as we're respectful of the ocean and adhere to the shark spotting signs, we can enjoy the water. And I think a lot of people are coming down. Muizenberg is such a family destination.
How much it's changed since 2008? A whole lot. It's become a much nicer place to come to. In fact, if you go down the beaches you've just been, lots more surfers.
I believe it's now one of the safest beaches in the country because we have all eyes on the ocean, and the shark spotters are really doing an incredible job, and people really believe in that as well. So on a Saturday or Sunday morning, this beach is packed from 7:30. It's a family destination, from the little ones that can just start walking to the guys surfing at the back line. Everyone just loves this ocean.
The tourists and water users have returned. The local economy has bounced back, with local businesses once again busy in the summer months. There is a renewed confidence to get back in the ocean and enjoy all of what it has to offer.
I think over the last 10 years, we've really found a balance between keeping people safe and keeping sharks safe here in Cape Town through the Shark Spotters program, through information and through the Exclusion Net project.
and there seems to be a happy medium. But there's always a fine balance you have to work on, because that status quo can change very quickly. You have 3 or 4 attacks, and we can very easily lead into a scenario where there's a call for culling of sharks, as is the case in Australia. So people need to be constantly kept aware that white sharks are still endangered. You can look around the world and see many examples of it.
The reason for the rise in shark attacks may still be unclear, but the balance between protecting the great white shark and water users has really paid off. The local community, armed with the knowledge that the great white shark is an endangered species, have found innovative solutions to safeguard those who use the ocean. For now, the survival of the great white in False Bay has been secured.